And now, another episode of the Upper One Podcast from the great city of Anchorage, Alaska, with your hosts, Scott and Eric.
Another episode of the Upper One Podcast. I got Eric across from me. I got Tim on my left. Tim's back. Like you said, Eric, he's going to become a permanent installation.
Woo! You know, we should just call Tim the Dirt.
I'm Joe Dirt!
You can't use that. That's somebody else's nickname from years ago.
I know, but you're fitting it so perfect. No matter how much cleaning you do, you can never get rid of the dirt.
Honestly, I was thinking the same thing about you.
Him or me?
Yeah. Eric.
Oh.
He's been thinking that about me for, I don't know, probably 25, 30 years.
It was the time I found out he was sleeping in my boat.
Oh, no, you did not go there, Tim.
So we could call him Dirt Roach. Like a cockroach, no matter how much you step on them, they don't never die. All right, so...
I cannot believe you just ratted me out about sleeping on your boat.
Was it comfortable?
It was, actually.
okay.
It was a nice bayliner.
We finished up the last episode playing around with these new pod decks. I thought maybe we ought to start the first one with an episode card. What's that one I pulled out there, Eric?
I already have my glasses on. It's talk about your favorite famous dead person.
Oh, my Lord.
Scott handed this to me, and I've been thinking about it ever since he handed it to me, trying to think of who my favorite famous dead person is. I'll just start it out with saying I think my favorite famous dead person would be Robin Williams.
Really?
That's a good one.
Because the first time I ever saw him was a old family friend had recorded an HBO special, and I didn't have HBO at the time. I never laughed so hard. And then, of course, he became Mork from Mork.
So this was the HBO special was before the Mork and Mindy.
I believe it was,
okay.
yes. And he was still just getting his start. I had never heard of him. I know that every time that I saw him perform, he was probably the best improvisational comic that I ever saw.
Yeah.
And always made me laugh, and it was really tragic the way that his life ended. But I would have to say that the amount of laughter and joy that he gave everybody probably, supersedes how he died.
Yep.
Yeah, he was definitely a great one.
He did give a lot of
He
people
is always
joy.
always one of my favorites, and besides Mork and Mindy, I think my earliest remembrances of him was Popeye. Eric, what about you?
I've been sitting over here thinking, and there's quite a few. That was a real shame, I mean, just to throw off some John Candy. I thought he was great.
Yep.
Richard Pryor. He was funny to
Richard
me,
brought a lot of laughs to me,
loved him.
too. I will never
loved it.
forget the toy.
Both of those guys, I mean, were great. So it's hard to say one person that, when I start thinking to myself of who really affected me when they passed away.
We talked about, in a previous episode, about the day that Dale Earnhardt died and shooting pool the next night with crooked pool sticks, but they were Dale Earnhardt sticks. So that's one that comes to mind for me.
Yeah.
But,
That's what I'm saying.
I mean, I could talk about Waylon Jennings.
Yeah.
We could talk about Patrick Swayze.
Yeah.
But the one that comes to mind for me, do you remember where we went in Vegas, 2016, when I got married?
We went a lot of places.
Where did I get married?
Elvis.
I got married at the Graceland Wedding Chapel.
Elvis.
Elvis died when I was young enough to not remember, but he helped me through the hard times while I was going across the road. If I was having a tough time, I'd flip it on that Elvis channel on this XM radio, and an Elvis impersonator walked my wife down the aisle.
Yes, he did.
And he even got me to sing karaoke because I got it on video. But
I was there.
Yeah, you were there. But Elvis, I think Elvis would be the top of my list as a one that one of the famous people that has passed away.
Like I said, trying to pick out one person out of a lot of this. I mean, you think musically, you think of probably one of the greatest people of our time, Prince.
Yes.
I mean, he was just incredible with the music that he could create and come up with in his mind, and then movie actors, I mean, we lose tons of them like we said, John Candy, and it's hard to just say one person that really blew us away, I mean, you look at the surprises, we lost Randy Rhoads back in the day. They all blow me away.
Yeah, it is tough because we have every aspect of our lives is affected by something. Music affects us.
Music,
we're passionate about
family,
this and passionate about that.
Not to mention all the family losses, but it's just tough to.
Well, the card said famous.
We could go on and we could talk for hours about this because you've always had somebody somewhere that has been, and not necessarily directly a part of your life, but, Influential, yes. That's where I'm at. We need to follow along with the first episode we had Tim on. He had some stories and some good ideas that I think he needs to talk about, with everything going on.
So we should move from the past to the present.
Yeah, let's move to the present. Unfortunately, I've been one of the guys that's been stuck at home, so I sit at home and I sit on the computer and for things to do. And I think you've got some experience with that.
Yeah, I think that, one of the things that Scott has been doing is been working on this whole podcast thing, the spare time he's had. And one of the things that I've been doing is kind of relates to what my wife has been doing.
Investigating.
She has a lot of spare time on her hands.
Leave it to your wife to create work for you.
She is constantly posting on social media all these treats. And she tags me quite often.
She's not looking at Martha Stewart or none of that.
She's not looking at Martha Stewart. It's recipes that she sees on Facebook and wherever. And next thing I know, it's tagged to me, and some of them look really delicious.
Well,
and if I think it's something worth pursuing, I will
try it,
save it, so I can look at it later. And I have made a couple of the things that she's posted on there.
Well, let me ask you this before you get into that. The bacon wrapped jalapeno poppers, isn't this where you got them?
I think I saw something on Facebook, bacon wrapped jalapeno popper. And then
awesome.
I kind of made it my own, and I like to make those in my smoker, which adds another level of flavor.
Yeah, and every time we've had something when we've had get-togethers, and every time you brought those over, I don't think there's any of them left ever.
No, usually
they get sucked down real quick.
Those are some of the best hors d'oeuvres, I think, and appetizers that I've ever had.
Yeah, she saw something one time. It was a cored pineapple that was stuffed with boneless pork country-style ribs.
Yes, I
and
remember
wrapped
that.
in bacon, which, come to find out, the pineapple just kind of overwhelmed that. And I think that the second time I made that, I ended up quartering the pineapple and just sandwiching the ribs in between the pineapple, which made it a little bit better. And
well, was the first time you did the pineapple, was that the quiche coochie night when we were playing?
Wait,
that could have been.
Why do we gotta go back there?
We're not going there. I just had to ask if that was that night because
quit interrupting, Scott.
There are times when Eric forgets to bring his reading glasses. He is getting old.
So, but anyways, back to the pineapple.
Won't admit it, but
bacon wrapped pineapple pork ribs.
It was really good. And recently, she has made a couple of posts that have been very intriguing. Actually, one of the first things I did was because I have a niece that lives in Georgia and owns a bakery, and she posted a picture of a bag of shelled pistachios that were dry roasted and salted pistachios, and was wondering what she could make out of them. And I started thinking about that, and I remember years ago, somebody gave me some shortbread. I thought a shortbread cookie that had pistachios in it sounded really good. So last weekend, I decided that I would make some of those, and I think they came out pretty good. I had a little trouble with the baking time, and some of them were a little darker than others, but they still tasted pretty good. And shortbread cookies are mainly flour and sugar. Because I added the salted pistachios, they were a little bit sweet and a little bit savory, so it kind of balanced it out, and they still tasted good. And then this week, she posted some pictures or a recipe for a chocolate chip cookie with bacon, which sounded really good because everything's better with bacon.
Exactly. I was about to say, everything is always better with bacon.
Have you guys tried the bacon maple bars? That
No. I have not
Oh my
had those
God.
yet, but
it's like a rush of sugar with bacon.
yeah.
So back to the
Everything's
cookie.
better
with
Back,
bacon.
back to the cookie.
So earlier in the week, we have a friend that also likes to bake and is sitting at home. He decided he was going to make bacon chocolate chip cookies and add a little whiskey.
I like it.
When I saw that, I was like, okay, I got to try this.
Or you got to one up him.
So, but this morning, I looked up the recipe, and it said use chocolate chips and your choice of nuts. And I decided that because I like these, I would get white chocolate chips and macadamia nuts.
So that's one of my favorite cookies right there.
And as it happened, I had a bottle of Jim Beam, so I would add Jim Beam to the recipe. And
So
I don't want to brag, but they're pretty dang delicious.
let me ask you this: Do you make, when you're making cookies and you put the liquor or whatever else in it like that? Do you make the normal recipe, or do you substitute the Jim Beam or the whiskey or whatever with something else?
I'm not a baker by any stretch.
It's a
But-
family secret. Hey, hold up, Tim.
But I will say,
Hold up, Tim.
without
It's a
Eric
family secret.
interjecting, because Eric can make macaroni and cheese, the Kraft variety,
You're darn right. You're darn right.
and heat up chicken nuggets
Oh,
like there's no tomorrow.
I make
but
beanie weenies like you wouldn't believe.
I love your beanie weenies, by the way.
when
There's
you're
a- there's
baking,
a secret to it.
I know the secret.
people that actually bake know that baking is a lot like chemistry.
Well, baking and cooking are totally different, though.
That's exactly
So-
it. If you don't have the right ingredients and the right measurements in baking,
well,
it isn't going to turn out right.
the reason why I
Is
ask
that
is
kind of
because
like I can give you the recipe, but if you ain't got the ingredients,
the reason why I ask is because I know with, like, let's just say Jello shots, when you're making alcohol infused Jello shots, you substitute something for the alcohol, right? Like water, or is there something you take out of
Well,
the
when-
normal recipe when you add the Jim Beam or the whatever
Well,
it might be?
So I didn't add that much of the Jim Beam because I was afraid if I put too much in that I would ruin the
Flavor
mix.
of the cookies.
Not the flavor. I wanted the flavor of the Jim Beam in there. I was afraid I would mess up the chemistry
he
to where
wanted the rest to drink.
that I was afraid I would ruin the recipe to where the dough would be too thin, and I would have these big thin cookies.
Well,
It wouldn't be
like
thick.
overbaked or something
Like
where
mush
yeah,
or something.
yeah,
It just
So
it wouldn't be a
come
cookie.
together.
It would
So it does. The recipe doesn't call for any liquid really. The liquid that you put in is a couple of eggs. I took like a 2 or 3 ounce shot glass. I don't even know how many ounces I put in there. I filled up the glass.
That's a big shot glass, by the way.
I like that one.
Turned out that wasn't enough because you don't really get the flavor of
Yeah.
the Jim Beam in there.
That's all. When you're cooking with alcohol, that's all it does is you put the alcohol in it. The alcohol cooks out, and then you get the
Right.
flavor left over. So.
But I think that I probably could put a little bit more in to try and get a little bit more flavor without really ruining the texture or the mix because it was pretty thick as it was, and another ounce or 2 probably wouldn't hurt.
And
Or
ultimately, like I said, that alcohol is going to cook out, and you're going to be left with the
Right.
flavor. So whatever's left in that alcohol is going to basically be water, And that water is just going to make your cookies or whatever you're baking with it moist. It's just going to keep it a little bit moist. So you're going to get a soft cookie.
Yeah. They're still pretty soft. They're not crunchy.
Oh, yeah.
And that's the one thing that one guy told me was that he says they were really moist. I think also because you're putting the bacon in there, even though you're cooking the bacon before you put it in there, there's still a little bit of that bacon fat when you cook it. It adds that little extra bit of fat in there that because the butter.
It probably helps bind,
Yep.
probably that bacon grease or whatever the fat
Right.
binds with the butter, binds with the flour, and probably holds it together pretty good.
I'll tell you what, this is actually getting pretty interesting.
Are you getting hungry?
Well, with Tim,
Well,
I mean,
the
hey,
next thing is that
Martha Stewart better watch out, man. We're coming up with some good stuff here
At least he won't be going to jail.
on the Upper One podcast.
she
You're
posted
getting
another
some good
recipe for
cooking recipes.
a jalapeno popper deep fried onion.
Oh my God!
So
Wow.
it was like you take the onion and slice it up, and you take the rings and you mix up this cream cheese, cheddar cheese,
Oh my Lord!
jalapeno, bacon
Oh,
mixture,
my
and
God.
you put it inside the slice of onion, and then you like roll it in flour and roll it in egg and then roll it in panko, and then deep fry it.
Oh my
So,
God!
so when are you going to do this?
I think it might be time for us to take a little bit of a long time out and put this guy to cook.
No, I'm
No,
not
no.
cooking tonight because I don't have the ingredients.
I'm just
I'll
saying.
I'll go shopping.
Next time we record this episode of the podcast, we could have them right there in front of us, and we could be
Hey, you know
letting
what?
everybody know how it turned out.
We got to try that though. That sounds wonderful.
We
Tim.
may just add on to this podcast by sampling those jalapeno popper
You know,
deep
We have
fried
to
onions.
try that.
So-
That sounds wonderful.
It does.
Wonderful.
You know what it sounds like is a lot of work for Tim and a lot of culinary enjoyment by Eric and Scott.
Probably, but that's how it's always been when
you
we've gotten together.
I mean,
So
you keep the idiots out of the kitchen. All right, Scott and I are idiots out of the kitchen.
hey, now I'm not that inclined or declined.
Declined, whatever.
I can cook. I know how to make macaroni and cheese out of the Kraft box too.
Hey, I can
But,
do that. Man, I knocked that out of the park.
I don't know if you guys ever knew the whole story about the first time I went to my wife's house before we were married. So, just to make it short, my wife grew up in southeastern Arizona. She was pretty much raised by her grandparents, which, you know, at our age, back then, our grandparents with the older generation, they knew how to cook and they knew how to bake. So she was raised being taught how all of this. Well, southeastern and southwestern New Mexico, you know, I don't know what the straight line is, but we're not too far from Mexico. So, you know, down there in that part of the country, Mexican food is a big dish. So my wife, she grew up, I mean, from whatever age, she grew up learning how to make all this stuff. Well, we had been dating, and, you know, we text and talked to each other on the phone every day. I said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm making sopapillas." I'm like, "Oh man, my jaw just dropped. I probably ran off the road." I said, "Well, how much are you making? Because I could be there in about a half an hour." And she's like, "No." She literally went to the store and got some more stuff, and I was there, and I had some of the best enchiladas, sorry mom, I've ever had, and I had some sopapillas. Like, you go to any of these Mexican food restaurants in Anchorage or in Alaska. I mean, we went to whatever it was down in Soldotna. They had what they called sopapillas, and it comes out and it looks like a piece of cake, like the size of a Snickers bar. I'm like, that ain't a sopapilla.
You see how big I am?
No. No. This ain't even a sopapilla. Is you it's basically you make it like it's bread, and you roll it out and you cut it into little squares, and then you deep fry it, and it puffs up like a pillow. It's not a piece of cake. I mean, literally spongy, that looks like the size of a Snickers bar. That was whatever that Mexican food restaurant there in Soldotna is. Like, that ain't a sopapilla. Where'd you get that from? Sopapilla is supposed to be like a dessert. Well, to me, it's dessert because the way we eat them in New Mexico is you get it and you cut the little corner piece off and you pour honey down in it and you eat it as dessert because it's good. Anyway, so that was my first experience ever going to what is my house now, as Shannon and I were dating. But my wife is an excellent cook too. She bakes and she cooks. Literally, I've never ever liked black beans. I've never liked them. You get them in Southwestern meats.
I love them.
You know, like Southwestern, whatever. Well, she put some in the pot the other day with ham, and dude, it was just like eating Frijoles beans. Oh. And she made some cornbread. So, you know, along with the stories of the baking and the cooking, like I said, you always grow up loving your mama's cooking, right?
No,
Mom, I am sorry, Mom.
Yeah.
I am so sorry, but I found, my wife, she is the most excellent cook.
No, my wife does a good job cooking too, but Tim is definitely,
he's the pioneer.
I tell you, he smokes stuff and it smells so good and it tastes so good. You know, he's a great cook, and he's really
you guys know that I'm not
made impressive stuff to me that I normally wouldn't eat.
Yeah, exactly.
And I try it because Tim made it. And
same with me.
So good.
Same with me. I am not a big fish eater. I think I've had one time. I've had some ahi tuna at Outback, which ahi they don't cook it very much. They just sear it and then it's done. I tried that one time. I grew up eating tuna. I grew up eating catfish, and then coming up here, I love halibut. But I'm not a big, I can't just eat a baked piece of fish. I never really ate trout or crappie or any of that back home.
I
than
don't
what we have.
Salmon. I don't eat trout.
But up here in Alaska, one of the big things is smoked salmon. The natives call it native candy, right? It's really good. I tell you what, since I've got my smoker and I've been playing around with smoking different salmon and trying different things with it, I've actually started enjoying more fish, and I never thought I ever would.
If you get the right smoked salmon, it's just like eating smoked sausage.
Well, like I said, and that's why they call it native candy up here, is because if it's done right, it does not taste like fish. But it's all about how you prepare it, though. If you do it the wrong way or you don't cook it the correct way, it's not going to taste like it's supposed to. But I have been playing around with my smoker, and just like Tim, with all these different. We talked about smoking turkeys and whatever else, smoking hams and stuff in my smoker, and we haven't gotten around to it. But I'm especially after eating some of Tim's stuff. That's what I want to do, and I look forward to it.
The one thing that I smoked once that came out good was brisket.
You ain't ever going to turn me away from brisket.
I'm telling you, that takes a long time because brisket's not a tender piece of meat.
No,
but it takes like 12 hours to cook a big brisket.
You can brisket is the cut right off of the outer sternum of a cow, and you can
tenderize it.
So you can tenderize it. You can tenderize it before you prepare it, and you can make it, and it does. But our smoke pit back home, and I'm sure you guys will agree, before all these smokers came around, was you dig a pit, you put a fire in it, you get the coals hot, and you put everything in it. That was how we smoked meat, pigs, and all that stuff back home. Now we got smokers that do it for you. So the main thing about how all this turns out is the preparation. And if you take the time to prepare it right, whether you're experimenting with it or not, it's going to come out good. Or, you might, the flavors might be different, but it's going to come out the correct way based on how you prepare it.
Now that we're talking about smoking, I got to tell you guys a funny story. Back when I lived in Florida and I worked at a big grocery chain, there was a guy that I knew.
Is this the same grocery chain from the last time?
Yeah.
There you go.
And he used to talk to the truck drivers. they all lived out in the country, and they used to smoke stuff all the time because they'd go out and they'd hunt for the wild pigs, and then they'd smoke the meat that they get from these wild pigs. So they were like, he's like, how can I make a smoker like that? And they told him, they said, the bread companies, they leave these aluminum racks out behind the stores. He says, just go get one of them aluminum racks and then go get some plywood and close it in. Dig a pit underneath it and get you some oak logs, because down in Florida, there's a lot of oak trees. They're really good for smoking. And they said, get these big aluminum foil pans and then go get you some ribs and you can slide the racks in there. They told him how long to do it. So he's like, all right. And he invites a bunch of guys over, and it was during football season. And so we all go over there, and he's going to smoke ribs, and he had a big pan of baked beans that he was going to smoke on there. And that was what he was going to serve for dinner on Sunday. So we're all over there and we're waiting, and he's got the smoker going out back, and we're sitting in the house and we're watching the ball game. And
You were there.
I was there, and we're drinking beer, and he kept going out and checking it, but he was just kind of letting it smoke out in his backyard. And he had this really deep backyard. And then we see this teenage girl come running across the front yard and knock on the door, and he answers the door, and then he goes out and he runs around the side of his house, and then all of a sudden he comes running back in. Well, he had a roommate who was moving out, and the guy had a waterbed, and he had a hose stuck in his waterbed draining it, and it was going out the front door. He goes in the guy's room, and he just grabs the hose right out of the bed and goes running out, and we're all standing there watching the game, watching him run back and forth like a chicken with his head cut off, and decide we should go see what he's doing. So we go around of the house and around to the side, and we see flames that are 20 feet high.
Oh my God.
Going off of the top of the smoker. And he's running out, and the hose doesn't reach. And he's shooting, and he says, get buckets. There's some buckets over there. Get buckets. So we're getting buckets and filling them up and going and throwing it, because the flames are reaching the power lines that are above the smoker.
No. Oh my God.
The fat from the ribs
Dripped down
onto the oak logs, and the flames went up, and the plywood around his smoker
fire.
and almost burned the insulation off the power lines.
Oh my God.
The flames were so high.
Oh.
And we had pizza. There was nothing left. The ribs were nothing but bones. The beans were the little black kernels. The aluminum foil pans had melted. The flames got so hot, it just melted everything.
Wow.
I bet. Oh.
It was crazy. It was the craziest thing I ever saw. But
That's why I like doing that turkey in the hole, You bury the thing, with coals and everything.
turkey?
Turkey in the hole.
Well,
Wrap it up in aluminum
like
foil,
I said,
slather it with some butter, wrap it up in aluminum foil, have a fire down in the hole that you dug.
That's like
Get
cooking
a
a
bed
pig
of
in the ground.
coals. Boom. Exactly.
yeah, like I
Is that
said,
how Hank does it?
before all these fancy smokers came out, that's what a smoker was. It basically, a smoker just uses the heat from that's being held in that box or whatever to cook the meat, right? And it's a lower temperature, so it takes 8-12 hours.
I guess the moral of the story is don't put the meat over the flame.
Well, no, don't put your smoker box underneath the power lines.
Well,
Yeah.
that's another good point is don't put your smoker under the power lines.
But yeah,
and
that's,
don't put the fatty ribs right over the logs; it'll catch on fire.
you've done a good job. Everything you've experimented with that we've had as an hors d'oeuvre or some sort of entree for dinner, that the pineapple. I absolutely love that pineapple, and I know you've done it. You've changed it since, but it's been good. I've enjoyed it.
Yep.
I've
enjoyed his food.
I've experimented with smoking salmon, and it's gotten me to eat and start eating a little bit more fish, whether it's smoked or not. I'm eating it. I've loved it.
Did you
I
smoke
actually-
that caribou?
I haven't done the caribou yet, but what you can do is if you want to make your own jerky, you can grind it up. And then I have the little tube, put that ground meat in there after you've put the spices in, and you squirt it out, and it makes little strips out on these racks.
Mm-hmm.
Put that in the smoker too, and it does the same thing. So I've experimented, and I've enjoyed what I'm doing, and I've got more ideas. And so,
yeah, I guess you can kind of use your smoker as like a dehydrator too. If you cook it long and low and slow, it'll dry the meat out to where, well, because that's how they used to do it anyway.
Yep.
To get
The only thing I don't like about the smokers is, especially when I'm doing salmon, is having to clean it up. I gotta get the bottle of 409 out afterwards and clean it off. And usually we finish up in the fall and leave it all winter, and then in the spring I gotta clean it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I don't like about it. But I can't wait to see what you pull out the next time. But
Yeah, well, I'm gonna
I can't wait to see these
the deep fried
jalapeno
onions
onion rings.
sound really
Oh,
good.
yeah, hopefully
So
by the next episode that we're doing, we're sampling them, and we'll be able to let y'all know how it goes. After all is said and done, I think we've agreed that we're probably going to have a dinner over here next week when we record the next podcast, so we can let you know how these jalapeno popper onions go.
I'm looking forward to it, Tim. You got your work cut out for you.
You got 1 week. Can you do it in a week?
I don't need a week.
Okay.
Man of many words.
That being said, that's Tim. That's Eric. I'm Scott. This is the Upper One Podcast, coming at you from the foothills of the Chugach Mountains on a 55-plus degree day in Anchorage, Alaska.
Beautiful day.
We'll see you next time. Have a good evening.